froze up. No kidding. Wow.
One year, the superintendent screwed up the renovation, the new school building article. There's a rule you have to follow.
It's fine.
So we
It's
opened.
fine. It's better.
Good afternoon. Is this on? Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get the school deliberative session for 2023 underway, and we will start, please, with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to introduce our head tables. First, to my right, is Budget Committee Co-Chair Ruben Parker, Budget Committee Member Leanne LaPlante, and Budget Committee Member Elizabeth Varney. And to my left, School District Clerk Linda Roy, Chair Carol Locke, Vice Chair Karen Karitonov, Member Pam McLeod, Member Rebecca Johnson, and Member Ann Pierce. At our back table, starting on my left, your right, is Attorney Matt Upton, Superintendent Tim Broderick, Assistant Superintendent Matt Jazokis, JMA Principal Jay Fitzpatrick, ACS Principal John MacArthur, and Business Administrator Heidi Duford. Now I'd like to read to you the moderator's rules for today's meeting. The moderator will not follow Robert's rules. The moderator will use the following general rules of procedure, whose main purpose is to keep the meeting moving and not get bogged down in procedural quagmires. By majority vote, the voters can overrule any decision that the moderator makes and any rule that the moderator establishes. A voter can raise such a request as a point of order. The moderator will take articles in the order that they appear on the warrant article unless this body votes otherwise. After an article is read, a motion must be made and seconded prior to any discussion of the article. The names of those making and seconding the motion will be required. The moderator will then ask for someone to speak in favor of the article and then open discussion to both pro and con. The moderator will allow only one motion on the floor at a time, with the exception of points of order, a motion to amend the pending article by the person who has the floor, or a motion to move the article in question by a person who has the floor. No one may speak unless they are recognized by the moderator and have the floor, with the exception of points of order. Everyone who speaks must use the microphone. Please start by stating your name. Be aware that the meeting is being videotaped. All amendments to a motion must be made in writing. Motions to move the question or limit debate require a 2/3 vote. Non-voters of the town of Alton may not speak at the meeting without the permission of the voters, except the moderator will allow non-resident town and school officials and consultants or experts who are here to provide information about an article to speak. All speakers must be courteous. The moderator will not allow personal attacks or inappropriate language. If you are out of order, you will be warned once. If you persist, you will be assisted from the building by the police officer in attendance. All questions and comments should be addressed to the moderator. The moderator will choose who responds to the questions. With the exception of initial presentations on articles, which the moderator requests are limited to 10 minutes, all speakers in debate will be limited to 3 minutes. Each speaker may only speak once until everyone has spoken, limited to 2 times per article. Voting will be done by a show of cards. If, in the opinion of the moderator, the result is inconclusive, a standing vote will be taken. A secret ballot will be used when required by statute or when requested by 5 voters who are present at the meeting, during or at the end of the debate of the article. A motion to reconsider may be made after a vote has been taken and must be made by someone who voted with the prevailing side. A motion to restrict reconsideration of an article may be made after a vote has been taken. Please remember that any amendments to articles must be made in writing and presented to the moderator. Thank you. First, we have Chair of the School Board, Carol Locke, who would like to make some opening remarks.
Good afternoon. I'm representing the school board today, and I've thought about what I should say. I first want to preface this that Alton Central School is doing really well right now. We're back to normal activities to a certain extent. We had our parade this year at Halloween, everyone loved. We're going back to the ski program. There are a lot of different activities that pre-COVID that we're now actually doing again, which the kids are thrilled, the parents are happy. And the school board's been working hard this year to make sure that everything is running smoothly. But what the main thrust of my conversation today is going to be about our shared services, because we have a lot of warrants warrants to present to you and a lot of information, but the superintendent's going to give you a lot of information, so I don't want to repeat what he has to say. So I'm going to talk about shared services, and I don't typically read what I'm going to say. It's the way I usually operate, but I have a lot of information here, so I want to make sure I cover it all. So in 2020, the Alton and Barnstead School Board signed an agreement to begin sharing central office and some other system-wide services, so we could share the cost of those services, saving both towns some money. And also to better align all three schools from K through 12. That's one of our biggest goals right now for shared services, is to make sure the students from Barnstead and the students from Alton are going into high school with similar experiences. So when they go in, they go on an equal playing field. So last year was our first with one superintendent and one business administrator instead of three separate superintendents and business offices. This year, we combined some additional services. So Alton Central School and Barnstead Elementary School each have their own custodial staff, but they share one director of facilities. The same is true for food services. Each elementary school has its own kitchen staff, but they have one supervisor who runs both kitchens. He's able to create menus and order food for both schools more efficiently, and each school is still responsible for its own costs. All of our IT staff is shared among all three schools. So we have one director and one systems administrator, and they are cross-training the technicians to provide support in any of the schools. They are also in the process of standardizing equipment purchasing, network setup, and some software, which makes it easier and less costly to provide support. We are in our first year of a 3-year process to consolidate to a single director of special education, which is how most school systems with multiple schools are set up. In the past, each school had its own full-time special ed director. We have saved a little money by moving all three schools' psychology services to the same provider. As a result of savings in all these areas, the boards are able to create a position for an assistant superintendent for curriculum, instruction, and assessment, who will be instrumental in helping to align curriculum and help principals and teachers address some troubling trends in reading and math achievements at all three schools. In the Alton Central School budget, one position is eliminated going into next year, and other costs have been shifted to SAU 301, the Joint Maintenance Agreement, which allows us to share those costs with Barnstead. Due to these changes this year, after adding the assistant superintendent position, Alton is saving about $58,000 in the current fiscal year budget, with Barnstead saving about $12,000. The other piece that I want to bring your attention to on the warrants are our teacher contracts and our paraeducator contract. Pam McLeod and I negotiated this year, and we can answer specific questions as we get closer to those warrants. But I do want to say that it was a joy negotiating with this group, and that there was a lot of compromise. So our teachers have agreed to turn to a less expensive health care contract, which is saving the district money. So I just want to point that out, that their willingness to compromise was noteworthy. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Next, I'll invite Superintendent Broderick to make a presentation.
Good afternoon. You said 10 minutes? Go. So everything I'm about to present, with the exception of the very last slide, is in handouts that are on the back table, so I won't linger on most of these, but when you get to warrant articles, you might find there's some relevant information here that you're interested in looking at. I'm going to start, and you're going to hear it again later, talking about enrollment. And if you've talked to me any time in the last couple of years, you've heard talk about enrollment, because we're down about 33% since 2007 across the system. Almost 20 years ago, a two-thirds majority of the voters in Alton and in Barnstead agreed to marry your fortunes together to a certain extent by creating the joint maintenance agreement and sharing this high school. As a result, your enrollment decline is their enrollment decline, and theirs is yours. And here are, and you have this, so I won't linger on this, but here's what that looks like at each of the three schools. Alton Central School, since 2007, has exhibited the largest loss in enrollment, followed by the high school with a slightly more moderate loss of enrollment in Barnstead. This is true in rural schools across America. It's not unique. There's nothing special or wrong in this area that has caused this to happen. This is an American rural school phenomenon over the last 15 to 20 years. It's happening everywhere. It's also not going to end anytime too soon. At Prospect Mountain High School, over the last 7 years, enrollment is down over 20%, and over the last 5, down almost 16%. At the elementary school, that 7-year reduction is almost half that, a little over 11%, and it's stabilized. I mean, a 5-year decline of 2.8%, I think that's 12 students. That's a pretty reasonable fluctuation from year to year, and there appears to be a pretty good chance. So predicting elementary school enrollment is tricky because the kids haven't been born yet, if you go out too far. So you're really trying to predict birth rate, which is part of what we do. I'm familiar with some of the societal events that tend to affect birth rates. And I'll just say that for the next 5 to 10 years, I think that it's reasonable to think that Alton Central School's enrollment may stay flat, not likely that it will increase. These are posted around the room because I'm aware when you talk about the operating budget, you may have interest in some of these numbers, but this provides some reference points regarding class sizes here at the high school. In the proposed budget, there are some reductions that I'll talk about in a moment, proposed by the joint board, and as a result, you see some of the class sizes increasing under the proposed fiscal 24 budget compared to the current year. Same thing at the elementary school. The ACS board here has asked that we attempt to keep class sizes third grade and younger below 15, if at all possible, and class sizes above that level under 20, 18 ideally. And as you can see, when a population bubble goes through, like the 5th graders this year, we've got to make a tough decision whether to put them into 2 classrooms or 3 classrooms, and you can see that creates a higher ratio, and you can see a larger 8th grade class at ACS this year, moving on to the high school, and then a smaller class moving up, and then you can see what's going to happen to the middle school ratios. But again, over the last 5 years, you've got a total fluctuation of 12 students at ACS. Not enough to really call for a significant change in staffing, and there is not one proposed in this budget. So the school board, the boards, I should say, asked us to try to level fund or reduce operating costs if at all possible. This is in a year with pretty significant inflation, so that's hard to do. And there is going to be a teacher's CBA on this warrant. There is a teacher's CBA on this warrant. Try not to cut programs. So a cut that would eliminate a program, for example, would be if at the high school we had proposed to cut, say, a metalworking position because there's only one teacher who teaches that subject. So that cut would eliminate the entire program. So we attempted to avoid that, and we did avoid that. I already talked about the class sizes at elementary schools, and of course, we have a capital responsibility to make sure that big capital expenses, building repairs, and things like that don't sneak up on the communities. Strategically, the chair already talked about saving some money and being able to expand our ability to align curriculum through sharing services. They did successfully negotiate a CBA with the ATA, and then later today we'll talk more about enrollment options and what that means. I won't get into too much detail here, but one of the reasons I created this is so that you'll all have it when you're talking about the operating budget. This is the Alton Central School budget I'm addressing with this slide. There are some reductions you'll find in both the regular program and principal functions. And you will see an increase in the superintendent function, and that is partially because we've moved curriculum administration responsibilities from a school to the central office to be shared by all schools. Healthcare premiums are going up, but it's an unusual year in that employee plan changes actually reduced our cost of healthcare in the proposed budget. Very unusual, but we'll take it. Another very unusual but fortunate development is that retirement contributions to the New Hampshire retirement system, which are set biannually, have been 22% roughly for teachers and 14% for other school employees over the last 2 years, and they are about to be 19 and 12% respectively, starting next year and then continuing the year beyond. There's been an increase in all schools in the need for behavioral services, which are generally contracted out, although we are working to bring those services in-house, which would actually end up resulting in a savings against the proposed budget. But because right now we contract those services, those increased costs are in the proposed fiscal 24 budget. There will be an increase in one-to-one para requirements at the high school. That increases the Alton budget because under the special education MOU between Alton and Barnstead that goes along with the joint maintenance agreement, each of the two towns is responsible for the salary and benefits cost of any one-to-one para working with a student who resides in each community. I talked about the move from regular program and principal to the superintendent function. Utilities are going up, and the high school tuition reduction is for two reasons. So the high school budget itself is proposed up. I'm going to spend more time on this, but is proposed up just over $28,000. But the high school tuition to Alton in this budget is reduced, and that is because the operating costs of the JMA are divided between Alton and Barnstead based on enrollment. So the percentage of students this year at the high school who reside in Alton versus the percentage of students this year who reside in Barnstead determines the percentage of the operating budget that each town will pay next year. So the Alton Central School bottom line of this budget, and I'm talking about the number that's above food service. You can, if you prefer, you can look at the other one, but just so you know, that's what I'm doing, because food service costs really should be funded by revenue. We need them to be included in the appropriation that's approved by the voters, so we have permission to spend the money, but the revenue we bring in food services is supposed to cover those costs, so they should not be raised by taxation. So there's a net reduction in the ACS budget. At the end of everything I just talked about and a few smaller things, there's a $108,916 reduction from this current year, fiscal 23, to next year, fiscal 24. And that, as we were asked to do, might set the stage for it to be a little bit easier for the Alton Teachers Association and Prospect Mountain Paraprofessionals Association collective bargaining agreements to be approved. With all three, I'll come back to this, with all three approved, the total school operating budget increases to Alton will be less than 1% next year. I'm going to finish with that slide as well. You have this, so I'm not going to linger on it, but when you talk about warrant Article 4, here's some detail about the proposed collective bargaining agreement with the Alton Teachers Association. Likewise, here is some information about the proposed collective bargaining agreement with the Prospect Mountain Paraprofessionals Association. On this one, I would just point out, and it's in the article as well, that Alton pays a percentage. It's roughly half, but it's based on that formula I just described a minute ago. That's the percentage of students who reside in each town, because these are operating expenses. So there is a total amount in each year, and then there's the assessment to Alton for next year in that article. You'll see that when you get to Article 6. And here's the bottom line again. The school operating budget is proposed reduced from fiscal 23 to fiscal 24 by almost $109,000. The Alton Teachers Association collective bargaining agreement first year cost would be $216,932. Alton's share of the first year cost of the Prospect Mountain Paraeducators Association contract would be $36,091. That's a total increase from fiscal 23 to fiscal 24 if all three articles are approved of $144,107, a 0.91% increase. I know there's interest this year in budget development at the high school, so I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on it. Thank you. Just hit my 10. So you can see the per pupil spending at the high school inflated significantly in 21-22. This year is 22-23, and I can assure you that next year when we have this number, it will have inflated significantly again. How do I know that? Well, costs have gone up from fiscal 22 to 23, from last year to this year, and we have fewer students. So per pupil cost, by definition, is cost divided by the number of students, and we're dividing by a smaller number of students. So even if costs were the same, this would go up, and costs are not the same. So next year, or at the end of this year, when I have a 22-23 number for you, it's likely to be significantly higher than the $21,541 per pupil cost. This does not include special education tuition. It does not include food services. It does not include transportation. Green here are the state averages. The state average high school per pupil cost in 21-22 was $18,870. The joint board, when I first met them 3.5 years ago, told me that they knew enrollment had been declining and that their goal was to find a solution to that other than eliminating programs and cutting staff and reducing what this high school offers to the students who reside in Alton and Barnstead. So over the last 7 years, there's been about an 8% reduction in teaching staff here at the school, while there's been over a 21% reduction in the number of students attending school here. So this year, the board's request changed a little bit. They asked us to present a level-funded high school budget. That was a finance committee. I've differentiated here their goals and mine, because after they tell me what to do, I get to go think about how to do it. They asked us to present a level-funded high school budget. That's different from level services. Everybody needs to understand a level services budget means we keep everything that we have and we just figure out how much more it might cost next year. But a level-funded budget means we take the amount we're spending and we carry it over, and we figure out what needs to be cut in order to accommodate some of the price increases that we can't control. Level-funded budgets are not fun. Nobody likes doing it, but they pay me. This is my job, and this is what they asked for. Again, I'm going to repeat this. They asked us to continue to avoid any reduction that would eliminate an entire program. So if we have one person who teaches something and it's the only way our kids can have access to it, we really want to avoid eliminating something like that. I wanted to avoid reductions in core academic programs for reasons we can get to later when we talk about open enrollment. It's a goal. Not all goals can be achieved. And then to look for reductions that would make us more efficient or that could relate to our graduation requirements, and I'll elaborate on that in a moment. Typically at this school, the department leaders and principal work together, then they submit to the business administrator a binder full of recommendations and requests, and the business administrator factors in things we know we can't control, such as collectively bargained pay and benefits increases that have already been agreed to, and increases in utilities or transportation that we already know are in our multi-year contracts that we're locked into for the following year. And that first draft budget was approximately increased by $500,000. So I received that, and that tells me what needs to be done. I need to find $500,000. That's my goal in order to achieve the board's request. So I did a second draft, and I got halfway there. And in order to do that, based on the fact that we require 1 credit in phys ed for graduation, and that under New Hampshire law and the practices of many, many other school districts, although in the past not this one, some athletic or phys ed requirements can be met through participation in other forms of athletics, which many kids do, and many schools allow credit for that. And again, this one hasn't in the past, but I've proposed that we begin. It is unusual for a school this size to have as many people teaching phys ed and health as this school has, and I proposed eliminating one position. Likewise, I proposed reconfiguring the athletic director position so that we wouldn't have 3 different people doing that work at 3 different schools. Prospect Mountain High School has more administrative support positions than is typical in a school with fewer than 400 students, and I propose that we eliminate 1 school year full-time position. And then I proposed a reconfiguration of our library services and reading services positions. We have a vacancy in Title I reading. We are currently not able to provide reading intervention. When the students who are seniors right now were freshmen, they were tested in the fall coming into the school, and more than 33% of them were reading at the 7th grade level or below. We have been unable for the last 2 years to find somebody to perform reading intervention. So, without going into detail, I know many of you are familiar, and we may end up talking about it more later. I made this proposal. This was mine. I could have thought about other places that our students receive support, and I did. There's an educational resource center. We pay a full-time school year employee to provide that place for our students to go for additional support. There's a library aide. We pay that person full-time school year to help staff the library to provide support for our students. We have an intervention room staffed by a full-time school year employee. I could have proposed eliminating 1 or more of those positions, which would have resulted in fewer adults to help our kids with their needs. I chose this instead because no adult is eliminated, no adult suffers any loss in salary or benefits or longevity through my proposal. My second draft went to the JMA Finance Committee, and they said, we asked for a level-funded budget. This budget is up $250,000. So the principal and the assistant superintendent and I and the business administrator worked with them over the course of a few weeks, not always fun, and did the hard work that needed to be done. And the finance committee made the decision to cut into 1 core academic program, the English department, because it was the only core academic department at this school with 6 full-time teachers as opposed to 5. They also made the decision to reduce a half-time school year guidance administrative support position based on the data I've put on this slide, which is that the high school had 5.5 administrative support staff with a total salary of almost $185,000 compared to the other 2 schools that have more students, fewer administrative support staff spending less money. And that was the rationale. They made other reductions that didn't affect personnel throughout the budget in order to get to the bottom line, which is a little more than $28,000 increased as opposed to exactly level funded. Inflation last year was more than 8%. The last 2 federal COLA adjustments have been 8.9 and this year 5.9. Prime rate increased 4 points last year. It's not easy to level fund a budget in this environment, but it was our job and it's what we've attempted to do. And again, if all 3 of the operating expense articles pass, the operating budget and the 2 collective bargaining agreements, the total impact on operating expenses for fiscal '24 will be less than 1%. Thank you. Do whatever you want. I will need it again, but we can.
We're just closing, so I can select it.
Yeah, totally. Let's do this.
Thank you, Superintendent Broderick. Just as a reminder, this is the first session of our annual meeting, and the second session of the annual meeting, which is voting by official ballot, will be held on Tuesday, March 7th, 2023 at St. Catherine Drexel Parish at 40 Hidden Spring Road in Alton. Polls will be open from 7 a.m. and shall remain open until 7 p.m. Moving on to Article 1, election warrant. School district moderator, 1 for 1 year. School district clerk, 1 for 1 year. School district treasurer, 1 for 3 years. And school board member, 1 for 3 years. Article 2, to determine and fix the salaries of the school board and the compensation of any other officers or agents of the district as follows. Moderator, $400 per meeting. Clerk, $400 per meeting. Treasurer, $2,500. Chairman of the school board, $2,700. School board members, $2,500. These cost items are included in the operating budget. The Alton School Board recommends by a vote of 5-0. The Alton Budget Committee recommends by a vote of 7-0. Who would like to move this motion?
I will.
Ann Pierce. And who seconds?
Second.
Karen. Thank you. Is there any discussion on the article? Hearing or seeing none, this article will be moved to the warrant. Yes, to the warrant. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Motion is reconstructed. Article is reconstructed, excuse me. Yes.
Robin Douglas. Robin Douglas or Robin Lane? What are you?
Article 3, operating budget. So shall the Alton School District raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amounts set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session, for the purposes set forth therein totaling $16,041,076.00. Fiscal note. The amount of $4,468,602 is the net appropriation for the Prospect Mountain High School operating budget, which is included in the gross budget amount listed above and recommended by the Joint Maintenance Agreement, the JMA, and Budget Committee. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $15,932,791.22. Typo. Is it 21 or 22? 22? Okay. 22 cents, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by previous action of the school district or by law, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13 Roman numeral X and XV1 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. This warrant article does not include appropriations in any other warrant articles. The Alton School Board recommends $16,041,076 by a vote of 5-0. The Alton Budget Committee recommends $16,041,076 by a vote of 7-0. Who would like to move this?
I do.
Thank you, Karen. Second?
I do.
Ann? Do we have any discussion on Article 3?
I have a quick question regarding the shared services. How many non-teaching positions have been created through that?
I could pull up a spreadsheet to get an exact number if you want me to. The only position created has been the system-wide assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, but we eliminated a curriculum director position and have eliminated a special ed director position at a minimum so far.
So only one position has been created.
There's been a net reduction in positions.
And Mrs. Locke, you said earlier the net savings to Alton were $58,000.
That's what I have on my sheet.
Okay. When the JMA was formed, if I can go back for anybody that's been here more than 20 years, one of the reasons that we agreed to build this school and run this school the way we agreed to do it as two communities was so that the split costs would be to run this school. And anything to do with capital expenses. We went through this when we put an addition or a renovation, I should say, to our elementary school. We funded it. And it went through its trials and tribulations and failed a few times until we got there. So, considering the fact that there's teaching position reductions in the Prospect Mountain High School budget for next year, I'd like to read this into the record. And I am reading from the Prospect Mountain High School School Board meeting minutes of November 9th, 2022, last November. Mrs. McLeod commented about the need to get the Prospect Mountain budget down to help support the high need for Barnstead to be able to build a building project for their elementary school. We're taking money and teaching positions from our high school kids that we pay to send to high school here in the hopes that a school gets built in the other town. This flies in the face of why this JMA was put together.
Anyone else have any comments on Article 3?
Hi, I'm Caroline Butler. I don't believe I know anyone here. I'm here because of an article I read in the Bayside about using Title I funds and reducing the library media specialist. I listened to what the superintendent said and tried to read through these documents. So I guess my first question is about how you actually intend to reduce the media specialist position. In my thinking, the library, the media center should be the hub of the school. So I have some concerns about moving that person, or at least part of that person, into Title I funds. Once Title I funds are used, that person really can't work in the library except on time that she might be paid through the school district. I know that the current allocation for this year that it sounds like you were not able to utilize for Title I was $71,258 and some change. Last year, that allocation, again, it sounds like you were not able to use, was $54,977 and some change. Primarily free Title I allocations come from free and reduced hot lunch. The most recent ones that were just published say that for this next coming year, the free and reduced hot lunch percentage for this year in October was 22.2%. So that's what the free and reduced allocation will be based on for next year. This current year, it was 20.5%. Not a huge difference, but the allocations were certainly different from year to year, and we can't always predict that. So I have questions, and I don't know if you're able to answer them in this format, about how you would reconfigure the library media position.
Who would like to respond?
I think we would have the superintendent respond to your questions.
And I'm sorry, could you repeat your last name?
Butler, the butler's speaking.
Excellent, thank you.
So one of the things we have not done in the last 2 years is roll over any Title I funds, which we
Fine.
are allowed to do. We're allowed to roll over some unused
Correct.
Title I funds, but since we had no use for them, we haven't done that. So we actually have the capacity to increase the amount in Title I. The way a school could split the cost of one employee between two functions and two funding sources like this would be to assign that employee, in our case, we assign 5 periods. The principal assigns every teacher 5 periods, and under New Hampshire law, 3 of those 5 periods must be in an area in which the employee is certified.
Correct.
And 2 of those 5 may be in an area, what's called a minor assignment, in which the employee is not certified. That's not part of this equation, but that's the law. Functionally, we would be able to have a library media specialist who's one of 2 full-time employees who works in our library, in that library, assigned to be there 2 periods of the day as a teaching assignment, and then using Title I funds, assign that employee to provide reading intervention services. There happens to be a classroom in the library with a glass wall, and that perhaps could be used for this purpose, to teach children who are far behind grade level in reading how to read. And if we had somebody who was certified in that area, those could be the same employee.
So are you telling me the media specialist is not certified to teach the reading piece?
Our current library media specialist is certified to do both things.
She is a certified media specialist, but is she certified to teach reading?
Our current library media specialist is also a certified reading and writing specialist.
Thank you. Okay, I'm still very concerned about the reduction of services. When do you make an amendment? I don't know how to do that.
Right now.
That would be now.
Okay, could you tell me the amount that the budget has been reduced for this position? I read in the Bayside a 71,000, but I don't.
The high school budget has been reduced. 60% of the salary and benefits for that position are $75,544. That's in the high school budget.
Are you able to hear the answer?
I heard 75,000 and something. I didn't.
60% of the salary and benefits for that position in the high school budget is $75,544. Some of that is assessed to Barnstead, some of that is assessed to Alton.
Okay. I would like to.
All amendments must be done in writing and
Okay.
handed to the moderator.
Okay, I need to go write that, but I may not have that amount accurate. So 75,000 something.
Bring it on up and we'll write it in for you. Thank you. Just as a reminder, any money added to the budget does go to the bottom line of the budget and cannot be appropriated to any line item in the budget. And will also have to likely have an exact same amendment in Barnstead to which Barnstead would have to agree to. Just want people to keep that in mind. I am sorry, we're entertaining a motion at this, an amendment at this moment. Could you just hang on one moment? Thank you.
I don't know who I'm supposed to bring this to.
You can give it to any one of us, the moderator. She's just referring to her.
Oh, I'll give it to her.
I understand. I'm
We'll
getting
get it.
configured right in for you. You're welcome.
wanted to explain to everybody real quick that the money added to the Alton budget is a little different than money added to the JMA budget. So that's what they're calculating, is to make sure that we can explain to everybody what the Alton portion is and the Barnstead portion is of the amendment that was presented to us. So they just want to make sure everything's accurate.
Okay, thanks for your patience. I'm going to read the amended article. Article 3, operating budget. Shall the Alton School District raise and appropriate an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $16,079,331.50. Correct. The amount of, I'm not changing that amount, the 4 million?
Yep, the same number.
The amount of $4,468,602 is the net appropriation for the Prospect Mountain High School operating budget, which is included in the gross budget amount listed above and recommended by the Joint Maintenance Agreement and Budget Committee. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $15,932,791.21. Excuse me, 22 cents, there is a typo, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by previous action of the Alton School District or by law, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, Roman numeral 10, and 16, to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. This warrant article does not include appropriations in any other warrant articles. The Alton School Board recommends $16,041,076 by a vote of 5-0, and the Alton Budget Committee recommends $16,041,076 by a vote of 7-0. Majority vote is required. So we have an amendment on the floor. Do we have a second to that amendment? Okay, seconded. Any just, I know. Okay. Paula, could we get your last name? Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak to the amendment?
Lauren Carr, what exactly was given to you for the paper for this amendment?
To amend Article 3 to increase the budget by $75,544.
So if that's the amendment, how is it that we have people in the background deciding to change this amendment?
They weren't. They were helping with the figures. I was unsure if she asked for assistance with the number. I was unsure if we were adding the full amount in or only the JMA amount.
Right.
And they clarified for me.
No, I don't understand this. Somebody gets up and says, I want to amend it, and you write it down and you put it in front of you. I don't understand where non-elected officials in the back decided they're going to change the numbers and change the amendment that was handed to you.
They assisted me with the dollar figure because
Yes, and I don't think
she
you
could not hear what the full dollar figure was.
That's the point. I don't think it's in the moderator's position to do that. It's if she wanted to say, I'm going to add $200,000, and she wrote it out, I think that's what we got to vote on, not a reconfiguration up here on the audit stage.
Okay.
It's her. This is like saying we're going to change some of this at the point. I know what she's trying to do, but that's why we write it down, that what's written down is what we're going to vote on, correct?
Maybe I can assist here. Your intent is to restore the funding of the position so that Title I funds are not used to cover 3/5 of that position. Is that correct?
That's correct, and I didn't know the amount, so I needed help.
The amount of money to do that in the JMA budget is
Yes.
$75,000 and some change.
Yes.
The amount that would be allocated to Alton to bring about the intent of the motion to amend is $38,255. What we did is we calculated what was needed to be added to the budget to fulfill the intent of the motion. Now, if we do not understand your intent behind the motion and you really want to add this full $75,000 to the Alton budget, we certainly can do that. But that's not what I understood your intent.
My intent was to restore the position to full-time. I apologize for not contacting someone ahead of time to determine the actual amount of money. But my intent was to restore the position, like Title I, hopefully be able to hire someone in future days using their money, but to restore the library media position to its full amount.
Well, okay, but, okay, I guess I'm saying you're not doing your homework. So, wait a second till I explain. I understand what you're doing, but you're given a piece of paper and said this is the amendment. You can't then say, okay, we're going to rework it to come to her intent. It's got to be what she
Mr.
writes
Carr,
to you, gives to you.
Mr. Carr, she said she was unsure of the full amount. I
Yes.
told her I would assist her in gathering the full amount.
Yes.
And that is exactly what I did. I am not out of line in doing so.
I've never
You
said-
may disagree with the approach, but her intent is now clear to everyone here, and that is what was added. We are now discussing the amendment, not how we got to the amendment. We're discussing the amendment. Do you have anything further to say on the amendment? The amended amount.
I believe the idea of having this paper
Do you have
given to you.
anything further
Can I
to
finish?
discuss on the amended amount? You are not talking about the amendment. You are talking about the procedure as to how we came to the amendment. Do you have anything to say about the amendment? Thank you. Anyone else like to speak regarding the amendment?
Hello, Richard Shea. I have followed to some degree the efforts made to bring this budget forth. As a taxpayer, given on certain economic conditions and high inflation and high energy costs, I'm very appreciative of a budget that has a very minimal increase. And from what I've heard of discussions and background information, I believe that the adjustments that were made in order to reach that point were well thought out and reasonable and don't represent a downward impact on the education of our students. I would not support an individual amendment that increases that budget, and I understand, I think, that even if that amendment were approved, not only would it have to be also approved by Barnstead, but it's simply a bottom line addition and is not necessarily going to go to the intent that the amendor had expressed. So I would hope the amendment is voted down, and I would hope that the budget is voted up. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to the amendment?
This very well may be the wrong time to say this.
I'm sorry, could we have your name?
Yeah, Joe Perry. Is this okay time to talk about the position in question in regards to the amount that we're talking about being amended?
If it goes to the amendment, which is to amend the dollar amount of the article.
Which was to overall increase it, correct? Or to
Yes.
return it back to what it was this past year?
Correct.
Okay. I don't have a whole lot to say about the numbers in general. There are a few teachers here that can testify that math was not my strong suit. But I just wanted to kind of talk about the value that we get for that money coming from Miss Kathy Frazier. When we talk about all the things she does for this school, being a librarian, being a class advisor, being basically a photographer for the sports teams, for the plays, attending all of these things for us, doing all these extra work, I think the salary that she's paid is kind of a bargain for what she does. If we're talking about, as a current educator myself, I've seen the trends where kids don't want to do the research, everything's on their computer, things are done quickly. not having a person like Ms. Fraser in the school, I think we'll continue to see this negative trend where the quality of our students will kind of follow the trend of the quantity of our students. Where if we don't have that person driving them to do the research, to have patience and be able to do the dirty work, I think the quality of students that Prospect Mountain will produce would also face a negative path. And now I know a lot of you guys up on the stage have had children that have went to school here and have had one-on-one contact with Ms. Fraser. And I think you guys could also testify that they are better students and more importantly, better people for it. So I think if I'm getting this math right, which I'm probably not, if this money is being used to keep her position what it is and keep her influence on the school as maximal as possible, I think this is something that should be further explored and definitely passed. Hopefully that was all right to say at this moment, but that's all I have to say.
You're fine, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Is there any other discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, we will go ahead and vote the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your cards. Joe, are you a registered voter in town? Do you have a card? Are you registered to vote? Did you check in and get a card? Okay, I can't count your vote if you have not checked in. Thank you. Okay, all those opposed to the amendment? Okay, I think it's too close to call. We're going to need to do a standing vote and count, please. All those in favor of the amendment, please stand. (14 in favor? Okay, all those who oppose the amendment, please stand. Thank you. Just to explain, as moderator, I will only vote to break a tie, so I should not have been counted in either of those numbers. I was not. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the amendment fails. We are back to the original article. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak to the original article?
Wayne Fraser again. I have a quick question I'd like to direct to the attorney, if I could. In the event that the budget is defeated and the school board is faced with the default budget, are contractually obligated positions that are in the current budget, i.e. teachers' contracts that are in the current budget, mandatory to carry forward in the default budget?
If there are contracts that have been previously approved, yes. They would be included in the default budget. So I'm not sure which contracts you're talking about.
The CBA is still in place and valid for multiple years beyond this year. So if a teacher has a current contract, all of the teachers I'm speaking about that are not in the proposed budget, if we go to a default budget because they're all under contract this year, do they get included in the default budget for next year, and is it a contractual obligation to include them?
So in the default budget, you would include all the positions that are included in the proposed budget. So if the budget had an elimination of a position or a reduction of a position in the proposed budget, it would not be included in the default budget by law.
Right, but I'm asking about the positions that are here now, that are funded right now. Do they
Correct.
carry forward in a default budget?
And what I'm saying is that if the proposed budget has a change in those current positions you're talking about right now,
Yep.
they would not be included in the default budget.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Moderator, as a point of order, and I'm not implying that the man has not voted, but I'm not registered or checked in. I did not see a yellow card in the hand of the voter who spoke just before Mr. Perry. Any?
Did you check in to vote? Yes. I apologize, I did not see that. Would that have changed were you for or against, sir, the amendment? You were against? It would not change the outcome of the amendment. Any other discussion on Article 3? Hearing none and seeing none, we will move Article 3 to the ballot.
We need to move to restrict. I move to restrict Article 3.
Thank you. Moving to Article 4. We don't have to
Vote on
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry. I apologize. All those in favor of restricting reconsideration? All those against? Yep. Yes. Article 4, Collective Bargaining Agreement, Alton Teachers Association. To see if the school district will vote to approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Alton School District and the Alton Teachers Association, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing levels. 2023-2024, $216,932. 2024-2025, $210,955. 2025 to 2026, $202,181, and 2026 to 2027, $176,100. And further to raise and appropriate the sum of $216,932 for the 2023-2024 fiscal year, attributable to the increase in salaries and benefits required by the new agreement over those that would be paid at current staffing levels. The Alton School Board recommends $216,932 by a vote of 5-0, and the Alton Budget Committee recommends $216,932 by a vote of 7-0. Majority vote is required. Who moves this?
I do.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Carol. Is there any discussion on Article 4?
I'd like to speak to that real quick. I just wanted to thank the Alton Teachers Association for a very positive negotiation this year. One thing I think that's really notable is that they came into the negotiation really trying to align their contract with the Prospect Mountain Teachers Association contract, which we approved last year, which I think is terrific because the closer the agreements are to each other, the more efficient it is for everybody to handle the agreements from year to year. The ATA has also made a significant change in their health insurance, moving to a new type of plan, which results in cost savings, both for the district and for the employees. So we appreciate that, and we think it was a great process and a very positive process moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. No discussion? Okay, I'll accept a motion to restrict reconsideration. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. All those in favor of motion 4? Any opposed? Motion carries. Do we have a motion to restrict reconsideration?
So moved.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Okay, motion to restrict reconsideration passes. Article 5, special warrant article. Shall the school district, if Article 4 is defeated, authorize the governing body to call one special meeting at its option to address Article 4 cost items only? Okay. No vote necessary. Moving on to Article 6. The Collective Bargaining Agreement, Prospect Mountain Education Support Professionals Association, NEA, New Hampshire. To see if the school district will vote to approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Prospect Mountain School Board, JMA Alton Barnstead, and the Prospect Mountain Education Support Professional Association, NEA NH, which calls for the following increase in salaries and benefits at the current staffing levels. Year 2023-24, appropriation $36,091, estimated total increase $71,720. Years 24 to 25, appropriation $22,039, estimated total increase $43,520. Years 25-26, appropriation $24,056, estimated total increase $47,504. And to further raise and appropriate the sum of $36,091.00 for the 2023-2024 fiscal year, such sum representing 50 64/100% of the total additional cost of $71,720.00 attributable to the increase in salaries and benefits over those of the appropriation at current staffing levels paid in the prior fiscal year in accordance with the most recent collective bargaining agreement. The adoption of this article shall be contingent upon both the Alton 50.64% and Barnstead 49.36% districts approving the cost items and raising and appropriating their respective sums of money to fund the cost items. The JMA board recommends by a vote of 8-0. The Alton School Board recommends $36,091 by a vote of 5-0. The Alton Budget Committee recommends $36,091 by a vote of 7-0. A majority vote is required. Who moves this article?
I do.
Thank you, Pam. And who will second? Thank you, Carol. Is there any discussion on Article 6?
I'd like to speak to this one also. Just another positive negotiation, a really great group of educators. Our support staff works with our highest need students directly and many times one-on-one with those students. So they're obviously very deserving of your vote. And then when it comes to all of our collective bargaining agreements, we've worked to align them so that we're not bringing forward hopefully more than 2 in any one voting year for both Alton and Barnstead. So the years have been aligned so that we're not kind of getting a hit of 3 contracts in 1 year kind of thing. So thank you to that group as well for a very productive negotiation session.
Okay. Anyone else wish to speak to Article 6? All those in favor of Article 6? Opposed? Article 6 passes. Do we have a motion to restrict reconsideration?
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you, Carol. All those in favor of restricting reconsideration, please raise your cards. All those opposed? This article has been restricted. Thank you. Article 7, special warrant article. Shall the school district, if Article 6 is defeated, authorize the governing body to call one special meeting at its option to address Article 6 cost items only? No vote necessary. We will move now to Article 8, the discontinuation of expendable trusts and capital reserve fund. To see if the school district will vote to discontinue the following capital reserve fund and expendable trust funds. Capital Reserve Fund, water heater, as of December 12th, 2022, the balance of the water heater capital reserve fund was 0. Long-range building maintenance expendable trust fund, as of December 12th, 2022, the balance of the long-range building maintenance expendable trust fund was 0. Window replacement expendable trust fund, as of September 16th, 2022, the balance of the window replacement expendable trust fund was $134.73. Said funds and accumulated interest to date of withdrawal to be deposited into the general fund as unanticipated revenue. The Alton School Board recommends by a vote of 5-0. The Alton Budget Committee recommends by a vote of 7-0. Majority vote required. Who moves this article?
I do.
Thank you, Ann. And second? Thanks, Karen. Any discussion on Article 8? Hearing or seeing none? All those in favor of Article 8, please raise your cards. All those opposed? Article 8 moves to the ballot. Do we have a motion to restrict further consideration?
I do.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Karen. All those in favor of restricting additional? Thank you. Opposed? Seeing none. Article 8 is restricted for further consideration. Article 9, special warrant articles. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $150,000 and no cents to be added to the existing Buildings and Grounds Expendable Trust created March 11th, 2008, under RSA 198:20-C for the purpose of building, repairing, and maintaining school facilities. Cafeteria Phase 3 upgrade. The Alton School Board recommends $150,000 by a vote of 5-0, and the Alton Budget Committee recommends $150,000 by a vote of 7-0. A majority vote is required. Who moves this motion?
I do.
Thank you, Rebecca. Who seconds? Thank you, Carol. Does anyone wish to speak to this motion?
My paper says at the bottom, the Alton Budget Committee recommends / does not recommend.
It's not how we have it on the warrant.
That, what you have isn't the same as what we've been given?
On that particular article, I have Alton School Board recommends $150,000 by a vote of 5-0, and the Alton Budget Committee recommends $150,000 by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other discussion on Article 9? Seeing none, do we have a motion to restrict reconsideration on Article 9?
I do.
Oh, excuse me. All those in favor of Article 9, please raise your cards. Those opposed? Article 9 passes. I'm sorry, can we do the motion to restrict one more time?
I make a motion to restrict further reconsideration.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Carol. All those in favor of restricting reconsideration? Opposed? Okay. There will be no further consideration for Article 9. Article 10, special warrant articles. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $80,000 to be added to the existing boiler capital reserve fund created March 9th, 1999, under RSA 35:1, for the purpose of repairing or replacing water heaters, boilers, and ventilation systems. The Alton School Board recommends $80,000 by a vote of 5-0, and the Alton Budget Committee recommends $80,000 by a vote of 7-0. A majority vote is required. Who'd like to move this article?
I do.
Thank you, Rebecca. Second?
I do.
Thank you, Ann. Any discussion on Article 10? Hearing or seeing none, we will, can I see all people in favor of Article 10? Please raise your cards. All opposed? Article 10 is approved. Do we have a motion to restrict further consideration? Thank you, Rebecca.
Second.
And Ann. All those in favor of restricting reconsideration, please raise your cards. Opposed? Article 10 is restricted from further reconsideration. Article 11, PMHS Technology Expendable Trust. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $15,192.00 to be added to the existing PMHS Technology Expendable Trust Fund previously established, said sum representing 50 and 64/100% of the total monies of the sum of $30,000 and no cents. Appropriation, and further that this appropriation shall be contingent upon both Alton 50.64% and Barnstead 49.36% school districts adopting the article and appropriating and transferring their respective sum of money. The JMA Board recommends by a vote of 8-0. The Alton School Board recommends $15,192 by a vote of 5-0. The Alton Budget Committee recommends $15,192 by a vote of 7-0. A majority vote is required. Who would like to move this?
I do.
Thank you, Karen. And second?
Second.
Thanks, Pam. Do we have anybody who wishes to speak on Article 11? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor of Article 11, please raise your cards. All those opposed? Article 11 passes. Do we have a motion to restrict further consideration?
So moved.
Thank you, Karen. Second, Pam. All those in favor of restricting consideration? Opposed? Article 11 is restricted from further consideration. Article 12, PMHS Athletic Field Capital Reserve Fund. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $15,000 and no cents to be added to the Prospect Mountain High School Athletic Field Capital Reserve Fund previously established, said sum representing 50% of the total appropriation of $30,000 and no cents. And further, that this appropriation shall be contingent upon both Alton, 50%, and Barnstead, 50% school districts adopting the article and appropriating and transferring their respective sum of money. The JMA Board recommends by a vote of 8-0. The Alton School Board recommends $15,000 by a vote of 5-0. And the Alton Budget Committee recommends $15,000 by a vote of 7-0. Who would like to move this motion?
So moved.
Carol? Second?
I do.
Ann, thank you. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak to Article 12? Seeing none, all those in favor of Article 12, please raise your cards. All those opposed? Article 12 is approved. Do we have a motion to restrict further consideration?
So moved.
Thank you, Carol. Second? Thank you, Ann. All those in favor of restricting further consideration? All those opposed? Okay. Article 12 is restricted for further consideration. Article 13, open enrollment. To see if the Alton School District shall vote to adopt the provisions of New Hampshire RSA Chapter 194-D and become an open enrollment school district for the purposes of allowing the Prospect Mountain JMA Joint Board, under the terms of the RSA, to admit students from outside the JMA's catchment area, with 0% of resident student population eligible to seek enrollment outside of the district. The Alton School Board recommends by a vote of 5-0. The Alton Budget Committee recommends by a vote of 7-0. A majority vote is required. Who moves this article?
I do.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Carol. And I believe Superintendent Broderick would like to speak first to this article.
We'll see if this works now. Yeah, we'll see. It'll be all right. It's all right if it doesn't. Everybody has a copy. Yeah, it's that part that I'm not sure about. Yeah, it's okay. Hey, there it is. I have to do something? Yeah, he knows how to do it. Look at this. You're the best, you know that. Thanks, man. All right. Again, there's a handout, and there will be, as you're about to hear from me, a public hearing on this item that's required under this RSA between 15 and 30 days prior to the election. So there's going to be plenty of opportunity, but I think it's important to talk about what this means to the extent that we even know what it means, and I'll explain what I mean by that. I probably don't need to reiterate at this point that enrollment trends here are the biggest issue in this school system. I could have put for the next 20 years, I think, on this slide, but very confidently for the next decade. It is going to be the biggest issue here. And if you look at some of the class size numbers that are both in your packets and posted around the room, you can anticipate what some future budget development might look like if something isn't done. You know, this year I talked 3 different times earlier about avoiding cutting anything that would eliminate a program at the high school. Someday that conversation needs to be had, and you don't have to look much farther than some smaller high schools or some middle/high schools, not too far from here, to see what that future could look like. And I think there are a lot of reasons to want something different. Fewer than 500 students in a high school makes it difficult to keep everything that we want for all of our students. As schools grow smaller, you see the signs typically in athletic programs, honors courses. By that I mean running start, AP, they tend to be reduced. And again, if you look at some schools smaller than Prospect Mountain, not too far from us in the Lakes region, you'll find some that offer 0 running start or AP classes, that have their students take those classes online simply because they might only have 2 or 3 or 4 students a year to take those classes. Likewise, academic electives. If we don't have enough students to put in a class, we can't run the class. If we have to eliminate positions, we don't have people to teach the classes. Extracurricular activities, fewer students, not as many interested in each of the things that we like to provide on an extracurricular basis. And then as per pupil costs continue to rise, more taxpayers show up at meetings like this, asking what's going to be done about it. As overhead becomes a larger percentage of the budget, you cannot do much to make it cost less to heat the school, and you end up looking at staffing, and then I'm going to go back to the beginning and talk about all these other effects. This is what happens as schools grow smaller, particularly high schools under 500 students in enrollment. So the green bars on this graph are an estimate, a projected enrollment here that I did my first month working here 3.5 years ago. The red bars are our actual enrollment at this high school since then. So I think I got the trend right, but it's been a slightly steeper slope than I predicted, but it's an inexact science. What I'm pretty confident in is that we will be relatively level next year, fiscal '24, and then there is another little cliff coming that will drop off. Now, if the trend holds true, and I've overestimated our enrollment, that might mean we are a school of 355 to 370 students. I don't know exactly, but these are my estimates. And I submit to you that that's not ideal. It means that the high school students in Alton and Barnstead will have less than we want them to have, and I would submit to you that that's not a good thing. We're also at a moment in education when I think it's a good time to rethink how we do what we do and to be open to doing some things a little differently. During the pandemic, homeschooling increased by almost 70%, and when schools reopened last fall, about 20% of those students went back to their public schools. People have become different consumers of education. They're looking for more choices. In New Hampshire, you may be familiar with educational freedom accounts, the innovation school law, and moves to expand vouchers. So again, I would submit that now is a good moment in education in America and in New Hampshire, and also a good time for this school and this JMA, this relationship between Alton and Barnstead, to think differently about what we're doing because of all of these factors coming together at the same time. I won't belabor this one, but I've always enjoyed this. This has been true for decades. It's not new. If you ask Americans, how good are public schools, give public schools a letter grade, about 20 to 30% will give public schools generally an A or a B. Ask them about their own public schools, and 50 to 60% give an A or a B. It's interesting, maybe a little amusing, but I think also notable that that second number is not higher. So declining enrollment here. I told you earlier that one of the two things the board asked me about when we first met a few years ago was combining central office services. The other of the two things they asked me about was enrollment and whatever experience I had with choice programs. And it just so happens that at my previous district, every single student who attended our high school had to apply. We were a public school, free to families, but no student entered 9th grade at that high school without applying and being admitted. This is possible in many states. I'm going to talk about that in a moment a little bit more. But what we've tried to do, the easiest, quickest way to add enrollment here would be to negotiate a tuition agreement. School boards in New Hampshire have the authority to do that. So the joint board and the Gilmanton board actually agreed to the terms of a proposal, but then the Gilmanton board went to their voters and asked them if they wanted to extend their existing area agreement with Guilford for another 20 years, which they did, and they had the authority to do that. They made that decision. Last year, representatives from the joint board met with representatives from the Milton School Board and made a first proposal to try to negotiate an exclusive tuition agreement in which all of the 9th through 12th graders who reside in Milton would have come and attended school here with tuition being paid by the town of Milton to the Prospect Mountain JMA. They took that first proposal back and talked about it amongst themselves. I don't watch their meetings, I don't work for them, but we received no counterproposal, no response. Informally, board members and I have attempted to engage in conversations with folks in other communities around here. I've personally had conversations with officials in 3 towns adjacent to us. Some of them might surprise you, but to date, nothing's happened. And that brings me to this question on your warrant, which has to do with RSA 194D, open enrollment. 31 of 50 United States have some form of choice among public schools. 14 states allow any student from anywhere in the state to apply to attend any school anywhere in the state. Generally, this means you provide your own transportation. And in 14 states, you can do that. 17 other states allow some public school choice with conditions, like we only have 50 seats available or 20 seats available or something like that. And then there are admissions criteria that generally have to be approved by state boards of education to make sure that you're not using discriminatory practices in admissions and things like that. But these processes exist. It's interesting, the site that I pulled this from, which is cited here, this is going to be online probably as soon as this evening, certainly by Monday, and those are live links, so if you want to go read the original sources for these things, it's easy to do. Some of the states that this site reports as not having school choice do, and I know because I worked in one of them, where every single school district is required every year to hold a public hearing on whether or not to participate in the state's school choice program. And if the district chooses to, the school board then defines how many seats are available, and in that particular state, the state controls what the tuition is and how it gets paid. But New Hampshire doesn't have any of those things, which is interesting because as I listen to some of our elected officials, I think I hear a lot of talk about school choice, but there's nothing here. What we do have is a law, RSA 194D, passed in 2009, called open enrollment, and it seems to describe what an open enrollment school district is. I found one district that has adopted the provisions of this law, and their superintendent told me that nobody has attended the district under this program. So it was not possible to ask, how does it work and what does it look like, because nobody's done it. But here's what the law says you have to do. The legislative body of the school district has to approve adopting the provisions of the law in order to become an open enrollment district and run an open enrollment school. So that's why this warrant article appears on your warrant. Sometime, at least 15 days before, but not more than 30 days before the election, there has to be a public hearing on this question. So that will happen, and I'm going to wrap this up pretty quickly today so that people who are interested can come to that. Provided that warrant article passes, the State Board of Education then must be notified of the district's new open enrollment status, and after that, the school board determines its admissions criteria, how many seats are available, and a few other details, which all also have to be reported to the state board. And then you advertise. You're required to provide certain information to the public, which is all on our website already, such as your program of studies and what extracurriculars you have and things like that. And then you can begin accepting applications. This is all in the law. And it's clear in the law that any school district legislative body in New Hampshire may establish an open enrollment school, and that is what this article seeks to do. It is also clear in the law that an open enrollment school may charge up to 80% of its per pupil costs to the district of residence of any student who doesn't live within the school's catchment area. So in this case, a student who does not reside in Alton or Barnstead, but who was seeking to come here under open enrollment, we would be able to charge up to 80% of the Prospect Mountain High School per pupil cost to the district of residence of that student. It is also clear that paying that tuition is not by mutual agreement of the districts. In fact, I have an additional technical advisory from the Department of Education's attorney, and there are copies back there of this as well, dated April 28, 2022, clarifying that. Now, it's a little less clear in this law, and again, no district has done this. It's a little less clear in the law if the other district has to agree in any way. They don't have to agree to the amount of tuition, that much is clear, but do they have to agree to let their kids participate at all? It's hard to tell, and I'm not going to take a position on that because it's hard to tell. And because nobody else has done it, that hasn't been tested, but the State Board of Education could certainly issue guidance based on the existing law or send it back to rulemaking. They have the authority to create rules around this. Or the legislature could get involved. I want to address the topic of a percentage of tuition in this way. You know, the cost to turn on the heat and the lights today is the same with 50 people in the room as it would be with 200 people in the room. The annual cost to heat and provide electricity to this school is the same with our current student population of 391 students for this year as it would be with 500 students. So I would submit that that should be considered sunk cost. Likewise, and if you go back to the boards or the handouts that show our average class sizes by department at this high school, the cost of putting a teacher in that classroom is the same, whether it's a history class with 11.9 students on average in that class, or a history class with 18 or 19 students in that class. It doesn't cost any more to run that class. So there is a number of additional students who could attend this school and it wouldn't cost anything, or it would virtually not cost anything. There's another number of students who could attend this school, and again, my magic number for a high school, and we could talk offline, you can come see me in my office if you're really interested in this, is about 500. That's sort of the ideal size for a high school that really can provide everything students are looking for. And I think that somewhere around there is the number that might add some costs, but far less than the per pupil cost that Alton and Barnstead are currently paying to run this school. By generating even a percentage of per pupil cost in revenue, we'd be better positioned. I don't normally read my slides to people, but I think in this case, to keep curriculum, extracurricular offerings, athletics, maybe even expand. In some cases, this is a sign of schools as they decline in enrollment, where you used to have a varsity team and a JV team. Now you have 20 kids and a third of them play on both. And then in a couple of years, there's only one, and a couple of kids maybe shouldn't be playing on it. And people get frustrated, and then it gets smaller, and then all of a sudden one year we don't have enough kids to have a team. This is what happens as schools get smaller. But at the right number, you can have a JV team and a varsity team. You'll have enough student athletes to do those things. And when this kind of revenue comes into a school district, we don't just go out and spend it and have a party, although some people like to think that that's what we do. No, it goes to decrease property taxes. That's what happens. And here, that is what would happen. So even at that number of students that resulted in some added cost to operate this high school, it is very, very likely that there would be far more money left over to reduce the property tax effect of operating Prospect Mountain High School on the taxpayers in Alton and Barnstead. Now, will it work? Well, I've talked about what's clear in the law, and I've talked about some things that are less clear in the law, so I guess we'll see. But this is step one. This is required in the RSA. These warrant articles have to be considered and have to pass in order for us to find out what happens next. We haven't been able to negotiate exclusive tuition agreements with some of these surrounding towns, although we continue to try. I had a conversation just this week with the superintendent from another town that has a much, much smaller middle high school, but I don't know if that'll go anywhere. But this article would begin a process, and that process would be a process of discovery. At a minimum, it would start some conversations. Frankly, I think it already has. I'm certain of it. And that conversation might not only include some nearby school boards, but is likely to include the Department of Education, the Board of Education, and maybe even legislators themselves. And that might be the best thing that could happen, because within a couple of years, we might get some clarification that would help us finally understand how this law is meant to be, or maybe after some rethinking, will be meant to be implemented. And at this point, we're on about Plan D or E, I forget which, in trying to address enrollment issues here at the school. So this is a proposal, and that's sort of an explanation of where it is. Like I said, there will be a public hearing on this. That's required by the law. And if you're particularly interested, please feel free to attend. Likewise, this will be posted on our school websites, both for the high school and Alton Central School, by Monday. Thank you.
Okay, do we have anyone who wishes to speak to Article 13?
Hi, Andrea Caruso. I know the answer to this, but I want to put it out there for public. Mr. Broderick says about 500 people, but I want to ask the number of how many people this building can accommodate, because I want to make sure that people understand that it will in no way crowd the current students who are currently here.
It depends on who you ask. I've heard 800, I've heard 850.
Anyone else who wishes to speak to Article 13?
Do you know when you're going to have the public hearing?
Between 30 and 15 days prior to the election.
Okay. And that date would be?
So I'll be talking to the joint board, because this will have to happen in 2 towns this coming Tuesday, and when I do, I will be proposing, I will be proposing Monday, the 27th of February. But that's tentative.
Okay, tentative. Now, is this just an intent? Does the JMA have to be amended between the 2 towns? Is this article just an intent to look into this? To make this legal, or do we have to amend the JMA contract?
I'll say it so he doesn't have to, but I've talked to our lawyer about this, and our opinion is no. That the JMA board has the authority to enter into tuition agreements already, and with legislative approval to adopt the provisions of 194D, would then have the authority to operate an open enrollment school.
Thank you.
Just an informational item for Mrs. Caruso. It doesn't matter who you ask. The capacity of this building is designed at 800. I know I'm one of the 2 people that represented this town negotiating the agreement that built this building. The capacity is 800. The 80% of the tuition, is there a way to recover the other 20%? Because you're correct that it doesn't cost any more to run a classroom with 14 and turn the lights on than it does with 15. But if you can collect the other 20% of that tuition, that amount that it costs to run that classroom would decrease, and we would not be subsidizing those students who come from other than one of these 2 towns. Math works both ways like that. Is there a way to collect the other 20%? Can the families be billed as part of it?
The statute says that the amount paid to the receiving district would be not less than 80%. So the sending district could pay us more if they want to. I think also there's probably going to be, if this starts to get some traction, probably some movement of the Department of Ed to provide some enhanced adequacy to the receiving districts to help offset that loss of 20%, but it hasn't happened yet.
Okay, so as of right now, the answer is no. According to the statute, there is no way to require the parents of a student who's going to come here to pay the other 20%. The district, I understand, is obligated to pay 80 because of the statute.
Yeah, the statute seems to contemplate that the district takes no less than 80%.
Right, so they would pay 80%. Well, like I said, we as taxpayers of this town are still paying 20% of the cost of educating that student who doesn't live in either one of our towns then.
But the statute does allow the school board to target the enrollment in areas where you might have the capacity without the added expense. So I think if the school board's doing their job and they're looking at that revenue of source and how much money it's going to cost to educate the students, they probably can work on the enrollment numbers in a way to try to maximize the benefit.
Possibly, but that's all speculation, of course.
Right.
So, yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Is this on? Did I understand this correctly, that you can do you're going to go ahead with open enrollment whether you have the people's approval or not? Because that's pretty much what he just said. No, the superintendent said that.
No, the boards have to have approval by the district's legislative body. That is the voters in order to do that.
You did say that they already have authorization to go forward with
No,
this.
they can enter into tuition agreements with other school boards. Any New Hampshire school board has that authority, including the joint board. They can't do this without legislative approval.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
Hi, Richard Shea. Just 2 quick questions. can you require any kind of admission standards, or do you have to accept anyone who applies? And also, if you were to elect sometime in the distant future to terminate the program, can you do so? Thank you.
So on question number one, the board of the receiving school, the open enrollment school, according to the statute, establishes its admissions criteria. However, they have to be submitted to the State Board of Education. This is typical in other states with programs like this that already function. The State Board of Education would ensure that there are no discriminatory practices and that those admissions programs or criteria were equitable. So it would require some care. The safest way to do it, in some districts, some states do this, is by lottery. However, it is not required under this statute that this be done by lottery. It does contemplate that a board can establish admissions criteria. So that's the answer to question number one. And question number two. Yeah, so once a student starts, is being received, they're allowed to finish. So if the board, which annually would establish the number of seats available in the school, and they would have to do that every year, if one year they decided, okay, we're not going to do this anymore, 0 seats are available, and that's what we plan to do, to continue, there would conceivably be students already attending, and they would be allowed to continue and graduate.
Anyone else who wishes to speak to Article 13? Yes.
Jennifer Shapley. I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. This hasn't been tried in New Hampshire before, and other school districts are going to have the same downward trend of enrollment in the future. Am I correct to interpret this as it's in our best interests to be maybe one of the first high schools to do this? Because as enrollment goes down in other districts, if we can maintain the programs that we're offering, we become someone to look toward of, oh, we do want our kids to go there because they're having more offerings than our school because our school size is dwindling. So it sounds like in the long run, this is really in our best interests to be maybe paving the way.
Well, I would allow board members to express their opinions. It sounds like you're asking for an opinion, but I'll say to that I think we already are. And at the public hearing, Mr. Jazokis has already been working with the principal and myself on data that we will present that I think illustrates very clearly that this is one of the best schools in the Southern Lakes region. And there are a lot of reasons why high school age students who reside in some nearby communities should want to come here. And I think one of the things that people have to have the appetite for if we're going to do this is talking about those things. And I won't name other schools, probably never. However, I think the data will illustrate pretty clearly this is a good school. And it's a great culture. Jay Fitzpatrick, over the last 17 years, has built a tremendous student culture with the support and help of an excellent staff. There are a lot of reasons why children, teenagers should want to come to this school, and I think we're going to be able to illustrate that in a pretty compelling manner.
Does anyone from the school board wish to speak? We have both. Who do we want to start with? Karen?
Oh, yeah, I would just want to comment on the last speaker. Very obvious advice there that being a trail breaker on this, does give us a leg up, certainly. And what I have to ask for a question to the superintendent, which I hope will explain another segue to your question, is there a downside, for Alton voters to pick open enrollment? Are we risking anything? My opinion is that we're not. That being the trail breaker really does give us a chance to promote our school. Obviously, some costs are involved when we start doing that, but we actually have grants funding that, to put up a website to show the open enrollment and to advertise admissions. but I'd like the superintendent to speak about if there's any downside for the Alton voters or any risk in selecting open enrollment at this stage.
I mean, if people get mad, they're going to probably get mad at me, not you, maybe the board a little bit. And I'm talking about people in nearby communities, right? Folks on school boards and administrators and, right, people in nearby communities who perceive something like this as a threat in some way, right, to their schools. Because if a student leaves someplace, then that school gets smaller. In terms of, you know, risk of time, of money, the budget committee did a great job asking about legal costs. You know, I think we're not in too far in terms of legal on this. If we go to the State Board of Education for clarification, I can handle that for the most part. I mean, this is, you know, you already pay me. So the time that goes into this will probably be mine, at least in the near term. You know, from my perspective, the risks are minimal to non-existent. There is that risk of some controversy. And like I said, you've got to have the appetite for talking about what's a good school and why is this a good school? And I think we're getting ready to do that.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, you know, the enrollment numbers are clear, and as a board, we've tried several options, as the superintendent has described, to approach other districts. That would have been the simplest solution, to bring 150 kids in from another district. And it wasn't because those districts didn't see the benefits of Prospect. It was their own political situations and the tough decision of whether they would keep their own school. I mean, that's a hard decision for a district. So this really just gives us options. It gives us more ways to bring enrollment, or call it a blood transfusion, into this school. Because we want to be a school that is innovative and can present not only what we have now, but different programs that make us the school to come to in the state. So thank you for that question.
Pam?
I think many of you know I'm an educator and an administrator, and I think that one thing that I always think about when I think about school choice and things like open enrollment is the value of public schools and public education. And I just want everybody to consider that there's a difference between taking public school funds and sending them to private schools, and between sending students from one public school to another. So it does feel like a big shift in education, but at least it's public school to public school. Students who are happy and families who are happy in their current schools aren't going to be looking for different schools. So I do think it feels like the tip of the iceberg in terms of there's definitely a transformation coming in education, and we're seeing it all over the country and certainly in New Hampshire. So it's not something we're ever going to avoid. It's going to happen whether we're at the front of it or not.
Okay. Anyone else wish to speak on the article? Seeing none, all those in favor of the article, please raise your cards. Okay, all those opposed? Okay, the article passes. Do we have a motion to restrict reconsideration?
I move to restrict reconsideration.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Carol. All those in favor of restricting further consideration? All those opposed? The article is restricted. Article 14, reports and business. To hear reports of any committees, boards, trustees, commissions, officials, agents, or concerned voters, and vote to accept the same. Furthermore, to conduct any other business that may legally come before said meeting. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak under any of those items?
Lauren Carr. I want to thank the superintendent. This paperwork you gave us today was excellent. I think your first speech in the beginning told us a lot about what's going on in the district. I know from several years we haven't really had the information given to us this well. So I want to thank you very much. I know this paperwork, some of it is not in the best of light, but it's the honest evaluation, and I really thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
One real quick thing along the same lines. It is a ton of information. In the past, we've often received from the school board in the mail a copy of at least the articles so that people can consider them and know what they're coming to debate. Clearly, I'm not asking for all of this to get mailed. It never has. But it's always been a one-page fold-up that goes in the mail so that everybody has a chance to see the articles prior to coming to this meeting and prepare. For example, right now, if you go to the town's website, you can find all the articles that are going to be discussed Monday night. They're nowhere to be found prior to coming to this building, and no one that's not here, if it was 19 to 14, the 33 voters that are here, no one else has these articles until they go to vote. It's one of the downfalls of the SB2, but it's that one quick mailing is one way you could make it better in communication with the voters.
Wayne, that mailing, correct me if I'm wrong, goes out between now and the vote. So they are planning to send it out, but it will go out with the final warrant article for the voting. Yeah.
That makes sense, Pam, because they're not final until after today's meeting. It would still be helpful to be able to have them in advance, even if it meant having to do it twice, because it would let more people see, and maybe more people would come and join the debate.
Mm-hmm.
Just a thought.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I actually want to say a thank you, particularly to Ms. Karatonoff for her last 6 years of service on the board and all the work that she's done for the Budget Committee. I know this is her last term for this year, but I know that public service is never easy, and asking people to run for positions and serve, like for negotiations and whatnot, and Budget Committee. I know that you guys are a thankless job as well, so I want to say thank you to all the people who do serve our towns and in this capacity, and it's never easy to do all the behind-the-scenes work that you do, so I just wanted to say thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, hearing and seeing none under the modern rules of order, I will declare this public meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.